After the rain ended, I decided to go for a nocturnal stroll. It was nearly midnight, and the streets were almost deserted. Almost. I strolled at random through the fringes of the downtown area, enjoying my solitude and the fresh night air, when I noticed the clouds. They were low, perhaps a mere 200 or 300 feet above the city streets, and wispy, ethereal, with long tendrils or fingers which seemed to be reaching down, to be clawing towards the ground. I watched the clouds, and as my mind was empty of its usual cares, my worries blown away by the sharp breeze, I let my imagination run free to build castles in the air, castles in the clouds, like when I was a kid, when I would lie on my back in the front yard, staring up at the blue sky and the clouds, and seeing shapes. Dogs, turtles, dragons, faces. Well, tonight I saw fingers. Hands? No, not hands. Not fingers. Jellyfish. Several of the low-hanging clouds had taken on the characteristic shape of a jellyfish. The bell-shaped head, the tentacles, and the long stinging arms floating just above the roofline, and extending closer and closer to the wet pavement below. The sight fascinated me, but it also grossed me out, for there is nothing worse than being stung by a jellyfish. I had seen, or perhaps I should say, I had heard the results of a jellyfish attack. I had been on vacation in Florida with my family and was at the beach when a boy around 10 or 11 got too close to a jellyfish. I think he may have even been trying to pick it up. Damn. I can still hear the kid's screams in my head. Naturally, I had to check out what was happening. And the kid's arms and chest were turning purple from where the tentacles had gotten him, and he was vomiting. They hustled him off the beach pretty fast. I think what made the whole thing worse for me was the fact the boy was around my age. At any rate, I never forgot the incident. I heard another noise from somewhere in front of me, and looking down, instead of looking up at the clouds, I saw a figure, a man, walking a few hundred yards ahead of me. He was talking on a phone or Bluetooth, and was being kind of noisy. I tried to ignore him and let my mind continue to run free. But why do people have to talk so loud when on the phone? It was spoiling my mood, and to my amusement, the racket seemed to annoy the clouds as well. As I watched, the misty fingers, the vaporous tentacles, seemed to be reaching down towards the man, as if to pluck him up off the ground. I decided to turn around, as the annoying person was spoiling my mood. But I hadn't gone very far when the damp stillness of the evening was pierced by a loud, wailing scream. I quickly turned around and looked in the direction where the screams had occurred. But nothing. The street was empty. There weren't even any cars. The shrieks came again, and this time I looked up. And there, up in the air, about 100 feet off the ground, his legs kicking wildly, was the man. It took me a moment. Okay, it took me several moments to process what was happening. But as I focused on the man, on his writhing body, I saw that he appeared to be gripped by fingers or tentacles of mist, of cloud, ghostly ethereal fingers which had plucked him up off the ground and which had raised him several hundred feet and then suddenly let him go. The man had been bawling in terror, but now he only had time for one long, drawn-out wail before his body struck the earth with a loud thud. I sprinted towards the figure, which lay crumpled on the glistening pavement, well knowing that I would find a corpse. The dead man appeared to have had every bone in his body broken. There was blood everywhere, but that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was that every inch of the man's skin, every inch that I could see in the dim light, appeared burnt, in some cases burnt black. What happened to you, my friend?" I said aloud. When I had a sudden premonition that there was something there, something nearby, I looked around, but couldn't see anything or anyone. But then I looked up. A number of what appeared to be ghostly, ethereal tentacles, or feelers, waved directly above my head. Tentacles of mist, of cloud, and I knew, with a sudden burst of terror, that they were looking for me, and that if they found me, I was dead. I ran, knowing those things were going to get me, and they would have, if I hadn't noticed the old warehouse. I had wandered into an area of old abandoned factories and storage facilities. The building I now saw was an old paper factory. There was an arched entryway leading into the interior, and I went for it, just in time. I stood in the darkness, looking out to where the burnt, broken corpse lay on the wet concrete. The fingers, the tentacles of mist, had reached the ground and were feeling around, searching for me, and as if they could smell me, the tentacles lifted up and pointed in my direction. They could sense it, if not see me. I moved back further into the building, into the darkness, and the tentacles began to follow me. In the gloom I noticed a door, and in desperation I tried it, and it opened. Just in time, too, for I was no sooner inside when something slammed the outside of the door hard. I leaned against the door to hold it shut, as whatever was outside, the tentacles, whatever was outside, kept slamming it over and over. I had to use all my force to hold it shut. And then I noticed that little points of mist were beginning to seep under the door like probing fingertips. I thought about trying to run further into the building, but I didn't dare let go the door. The only sound in that enclosed space was the sound of my labored breathing. But after a few minutes, I became aware of another sound, a loud, persistent sound, the sound of a torrential downpour. I noticed the misty fingertips were no longer there. I waited several minutes, then tentatively opened the door. The mist was gone, the tentacles, the probing, stinging fingers, all gone, as was the corpse. vanished. It had vanished. I made my way home in the torrential downpour, no longer caring about getting soaked. Over the next few days, I scanned the papers to see if there was any mention of the discovery of a dead body. But nothing. The corpse really had vanished. So what happened? The only conclusion I can come to is that there are things living up in the sky. Giant, deadly, jellyfish-like creatures. I remember having seen an old book by a guy named Gaddis who claimed such monsters really did exist. And then there was that story by the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle, the story called The Horror of the Heights, which features deadly jellyfish living in the upper atmosphere. All I know is that if there is a single cloud in the sky, I'm not going outside. My grandparents were old hippies, and they used to play this song by this Judy woman, and one of its lines has stuck with me in my predicament. The line, I really don't know clouds at all. Me neither. Or maybe I know them too well. Too damn well. The moral of the story: if it is impossible to fully know and understand another human being, how the hell are you going to understand a cloud? If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix here. That's PX here. While the music was the eerie and disturbing Aftermath by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.